Okay, everybody. Next talk is from Gyle de Cruz about incident response.
Thank you very much. So once again, thank you for having me here. This is my second time doing a talk in LCA, so it's like really good to be back. So before I start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet virtually today, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. So this particular talk, it's based on the things that I've experienced before. There's always like a lot of questions, so I'm coming from the perspective of system administrators who are like probably thinking, why are they referring to us incident responders? Why are they asking me to do this? Or as I call this talk, adventures in Ireland. Okay. So first off, okay, so for those who are wondering, I'm based in Melbourne, where we have the best coffee, and I'm a senior security consultant focusing on incident response, and I'm part of the IBM X-Force IR. So it's a cool name, X-Force. Okay, so I shifted to tech in the early part of this century, and I received my graduate certificate in incident response from SANS Institute and went on to go for a master's in cybersecurity, focusing specifically on digital forensics. And I volunteer for different organizations, so I hang out in different Slacks and Discord channel after work. Okay, and I do mentoring with different organizations. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything, feel free to DM me in Twitter. My DMs are open. Okay, now, so what will I be talking about? It's like basically just these three things here. Why I decided to submit to a talk again to this Linux conference, specifically in this system administration mini conference. And then I'm going to be talking about the incident response life cycle. And then what are the typical activities and questions. Okay, so let me just make sure that I have everything here that I could still see, something here. Okay, so it was last year when I read the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index report. And one of the things that actually stuck to my mind was that there was a proliferation of malware that targets Linux towards the 2020. So the 2021 Intelligence Index actually covers like the previous year. So now this year, 2022, the report is being, generated and finalized. So this particular thought stuck in my mind, and like, someone who has, okay, please don't flame me or something, who's, basically have a Windows background. Okay, and I thought like now, threat actors or attackers are now, focusing on, the Linux operating system. And largely because we have, the cloud resources up there, or I just like say up there, the cloud, options wherein you could like spin up your servers. So there's also that widespread adoption of Linux as the operating system. So there is actually a rise in the Linux malware families. Specifically, what my colleagues in the X-Force IR team and the Intel team actually found out was that there was a rise in terms of developing Linux crypto miners and ransomware. And because of that move of the servers to the cloud. Now, it was quite interesting that some of the incident response cases that my colleagues have investigated, they found, Linux variant of the Defray 911 or the ransom EXX ransomware, and also the S-File ransomware. So that stuck in my mind, and I thought like, hey, I want to make sure that people with a Linux background could sort of like understand why are we, asking a lot of questions during the incident response process. Okay, and one of the things that I want to highlight, especially to you who are listening in this to my talk, is that you, as the system admins, you are actually considered security incident first responders. Whether you like it or not, you are part of like the bigger IR process. And why? Because you're the one who have deployed your servers, or if not, you are the one who are taking care of the servers and the applications there. So you are the best person to understand what is happening in your, servers, in your environment, and if there's something dodgy going on, using your tools or whatever, monitoring tools or scripts that you may have there, you will be like alerted. So you will have, that first-hand knowledge about your systems. Okay, and so my goal for this short talk is to walk you through the IR process so that you understand why you may get asked certain questions, or you may be asked to participate in certain activities. Okay, now, so there's this diagram. This is a classic diagram. It actually comes from the NIST. There is a document called Computer Security Incident Handling Guide. And think of the IR as a life cycle. And each phase has its own distinctive activities. Okay? Now, the idea before you actually have an incident is that you should have like prepared, or you haven't had any incidents yet. That's like really fantastic. But you don't rest on your laurels and say, yeah, we haven't had like any incidents or anything or security breaches. It is a reality and a sad fact that there will be breaches, there will be like, incidents, and you need to be prepared for that. So the first part of the IR life cycle is that it's preparation. So what is involved in preparation? Okay, so first of all, you have to have an IR plan. Okay, now, if you don't have an IR plan in your organization, please start brainstorming and thinking about it, and make sure that you have a plan that is communicated to everyone, like in the technology teams, so that they are aware of like what are they supposed to do in case there is a breach or a security incident. Now, let me clarify first the terms about like incident. So some people get confused about events and incidents. So when we talk about an event, that means there is an observable change, or there is something that occurred. So what is an event? So it could be that there was a connection from one endpoint, like a host, connecting to a server. So that is an event. Now, what is an incident? Incident basically means, in the parlance or terminology of incident response, it means that there was an event. It's not a false positive, it's a true positive, and it has breached the security triad. So what's a security triad? You have the CIA. So you have not the espionage agency, but confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, so that's how we define incident. Now, in order to prepare, when you prepare for the response to an incident, so there are things that you can do. Okay, there is what is known as tabletop exercise, or TTX. Okay, so you, as the system administrator, as part of the security first responder team, you could possibly be invited to join or attend a TTX. So if they ask you, could you please attend the tabletop exercise, please don't say no. Please say yes, because this is the chance for you to actually be involved in a simulated, think of it as a mock incident. There's a mock incident. There is an incident that, think of it as like a scenario based on the most likely, incidents that will affect your industry or your organization, prepared by either someone inside the organization, or it could be that they've engaged, a consulting team. So just to clarify, when we talk about tabletop exercises, this is non-functional, because some technical people, they're kind of afraid, like, oh, I need to like do this and do that and all those things. No, it's just think of it as like everybody just talking, like there's going to be like a situation provided to you, and then you'll be asked to talk about what are you supposed to do once you see this, or get this particular information. And then after that, there's going to be injects. Okay, injects are like, additional information that are provided to you to move the incident along. Okay, so once someone asks you to, could you please, attend the tabletop exercise, just say yes. Another thing that you could potentially be asked to do as part of the preparation phase is to check a playbook. So what is a playbook? Think of this as, processes or the procedures that are needed in order for the organization or for your team to respond to security incidents. So sometimes, as the subject matter expert, you will be consulted and asked, hey, we have this playbook for this. Could you please take a look at that? Could you please check this? So please say yes. And then another thing that you could potentially be asked to do is about logs. So as digital forensics, investigator, incident responder, we love logs. Okay, because logs give us, a lot of information regarding timestamp, what has happened. So log analysis is one of the things that we do as incident responders. Now, maybe you'll be asked, hey, could you check the log retention period? How long do we keep our logs locally? And then aside from local, storage, there's also such thing as, are we sending it somewhere? It could be in another data center, it could be in the cloud. So the log retention period is important, especially if we need to go back and check what happened before a particular incident. Okay, now, so that's for the preparation phase. The next phase is called detection and analysis. Okay, so it is possible that by the time that you've been called to install an EDR, an endpoint detection response agent on the endpoint, there's already an incident. And to further figure out what's happening across your environment, you may be asked to suddenly deploy an EDR agent. But supposedly, this EDR agent should have been put in there during the preparation phase. But sometimes, you may not have that, but, you gotta do what you have to do. Okay. Now, another thing that you may be asked to do is to run certain scripts to collect a triage package. So just to clarify, a triage package, think of it as basic, information needed to investigate the incident. So you will probably be asked, for example, there is this the Velociraptor. You could use it as an offline triage collector, or specifically for Linux, Unix, OS. There is the UAC, which stands for Unix like artefacts collector. So you may be asked to deploy that, run these particular scripts, and then once the script has finished collecting all those potential artifacts or data, you may be asked to, could you please, of course, in the time of the pandemic, everybody's working remotely, you'll be asked to save it, send it to a secure cloud storage. It used to be that when there's an incident before the pandemic or before times, incident responders will actually go on site, okay, to the client site or to that particular site and start, collecting these sources of evidence. But now, because of the challenges with traveling and some restrictions, sometimes you'll be provided with the one-page instructions on how to actually run this, and then given a link to a secure cloud storage, and then you upload the collected artifacts there. And then sometimes it could be that you'll be asked to collect certain specific artifacts, like for example, the contents of the /etc directory or the /home directory, for, figuring out who are the users there. And most especially the /var directory. There's a lot of logs there. So one of the things that we commonly check is the contents of the WTMP for successful logins and logouts, okay, and the BTMP for failed login. Okay, and one thing that we actually check for BTMP, for failed login, is that it is possible that a user may have accidentally typed their password at the user login prompt. So we could actually see that. We're going to check that. The other thing, so aside from that, there's also the last log file, which is the most recent user login. So it really depends on what kind of incident are we investigating. It could be potential insider threat, or it could be that you have attackers who were able to go into your organization and they've been moving around and trying to log on to the different, servers. Okay, so as we go along in the incident process, or in the incident, response life cycle, there is this part called containment, eradication, and recovery phase. Okay, so potentially you may be asked to uh, do some quarantining or containment of the server. So when we talk about containment, okay, there are several ways that you could do that. Okay, you could do it on a network level. Ask the network team, hey, could you please shut down the that particular switch port. Okay, or it could be that you have an EDR which has the capability to do containment or quarantine, wherein the network communication is going to be stopped except from the server to the EDR server, or it could be an EDR in the cloud. Okay, so that's the only network communication that's allowed. Uh, Several years ago, actually it's more than a decade ago, believe it or not, I had one client who actually told me, in our panic in containing the server, they actually unplug it, and he like, oh, unplug, the LAN cable, no, the power cable. Oh, please don't do that, because we will lose certain artifacts that are volatile, like for example things that are in the memory. Okay, so make sure that you have a procedure for containing your servers. Okay, now, if let's just say this is a particular, incident requiring a fresh reinstall, like for example, it could be that you've been hit with, ransomware, and you, you know, your choice now is, hey, we just have to, do a fresh reinstall. So potentially you could be asked to do that. Okay, or it could be that, okay, once we've like done our reinstall, you're going to be asked, hey, can we use the backups? Okay, but before you use the backup, make sure that your backups are clean. What do I mean by that? It could be that when your system was backed up, it also backed up the binaries for the malware or for the ransomware. So you basically started like a fresh reinstall, and then you put your backup in, and then you get, infected again. So just make sure that you also check your backups whether they're clean. Okay, and then another thing is that, are your backups usable? So part of the preparation phase would be, in terms of the backups, you always check your backups too, because you may be like doing a backup but you haven't really tried a restore, and it could be that during your hour of need, that's when you need to restore your backups, you find out that they're not usable. So make sure that before this happens, part of the preparation is check that your backups are usable. Okay, now potentially, okay, as you go progress along the way for this incident response, life cycle, there are things that you learn, like, oh, we should have done this. Okay, so at this particular phase, it's called the post-incident activity, or sometimes it's called lessons learned phase. Okay, for this, okay, it could be like you'll be asked questions about what can we improve. Okay, what can we improve as a team, or in terms like processes, or it could be maybe there is some challenges in terms of the technology that you have there, or it could be that you don't have enough people. So typically most of like the lessons learned will be focused on these three things: people, processes, and technology. And then what did we learn from this? Okay, and then what are the improvements that we need to make in order to make sure that we are able to protect our organization, our information assets, and have probably, let's just say, faster recovery time. So basically, it's more about questions like, how can we do better next time? Okay, so these are the things that would actually help improve your incident response capacity, or I'm sorry, capability. Or sometimes what happens is that an incident happens and you think that, oh, we're all set, we have the IR plan, and then turns out that the IR plan hasn't been updated in ages, and when you look at it, it's not, you don't have the correct, contact list, or it could be like people have moved on, so you don't know who to contact about this particular information assets. And then, part of the post-incident activity is to make sure that you also improve, update your incident response plan. Okay, now, as you go along here, there's definitely a lot of lessons learned. Make sure that you are also documenting each step of the way. Like, for example, if you were asked by, let's just say, third-party vendor or a service provider, a security service provider, to run certain scripts or to, install certain agents and all those things, make sure that you're also documenting them, because later on, if let's just say there is a need to do it again, at least you have them ready. Or it could be that whatever steps that were done during the detection, analysis, the containment, this could potentially be part of a new playbook. So the cycle, let me go back again. Okay, the cycle here, as you can see, okay, so you progress along from preparation to detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery to post-incident activity. So after that, okay, whatever you've learned here, you go back to the preparation, meaning you maybe things that you've learned, you can create a mock incident, you can have another tabletop exercise, or you could create another playbook. Okay? Now, my ask from you, okay, for after this is that please, when you go back to work, think about your incident response process. Do you have a plan? Or if you have a plan, when was the last time you tested it? When was the last time, let's just say, you updated it? Do you have annual tabletop exercises? Do you have playbooks there? So you start thinking about this, and slowly but surely, you go along, and I know it's going to be a big ask, because aside from doing your system administration duties, because of COVID and the pandemic, you may be asked to do other things, especially covering for, let's just say, other shifts of people who may be isolating and can't work. So do it, maybe like on a quarterly basis. You have a plan to do this part, and then after that, do another part. Okay, so with that, okay, so if you're interested in getting a copy of the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index, just go to the IBM website, search for it, okay, and you have to provide some, information about your email and all those things. Don't worry, we have this, the data privacy, regulations and all those things. So, and you can opt out of marketing just to get a copy of that report. Okay, and then there's a good guide from NIST. That's, remember, it's the publication 800-61R2. It's available for free from NIST. And then if you are interested into in terms of specializing in, let's just say, digital forensics, coming from a Linux background, there's a very good book from No Starch Press. It's called Practical Linux Forensics. That's a very good book. If you need to actually collect some artifacts, you can, go to GitHub, search for the UAC, or, you can use also Velociraptor. Okay. So if you have any questions after this conference, I have allocated, a few minutes for some questions. Okay, you can ask those questions. If not, you can always DM me in Twitter. Okay, so that's it. So I'm gonna just minimize this so I could see if there's any questions there.
Yep, there's a couple of questions. So first question is, do you prefer people to rebuild servers and restore data, or restore the full image during the recovery phase?
As with all things within the IR world, it depends on, how fast you need the system to be up. So you're the one who's going to be deciding, because you're the information asset owners. Okay, just make sure that before you start, putting back all those backups, as I mentioned before, make sure that they're clean. Okay.
Okay. Next question is, how do you balance incidents that affect support systems versus responses that potentially affect production systems? How do you go about risk assessment on the changes involved in responses?
Okay, so once again, it depends on the organization's risk profile, or what they consider as very critical to their existence. So if, let's just say, what is very important for their existence is, remediating immediately what's in production, because once production's affected, that basically affects the whole business. So you start, responding there. So typically, let's just say a sample scenario would be, let's just say, ransomware. Okay, wherein it could be like several servers may have been affected and they immediately ring our IR hotline. So we immediately stand up a lot of streams. So there's several work streams in parallel happening at the same time. So we have the incident response, happening, wherein there's going to be a collection of the artifacts to make sure that we know what we're dealing with. So we have to make sure that we understand what is this malware, what are the capabilities, and then there would be some collection of, let's just say, certain files, because if it's like a new malware variant, we'll have a separate track for the reverse engineers who are going to be doing the reverse engineering on the malware. Then we have a separate track wherein we start doing like, the remediation. So sometimes what happens is that you have several tracks happening at the same time. Okay, but in order to do that, you will need to make sure that in your organization, if your IR team is in-house, you have enough people there. And that's why what I found was that most organizations will actually call in a third-party vendor, but please make sure that you have an existing retainer first. Because what happened, what I've seen so far, is that some organizations don't have that retainer or like a contract or something, and they start calling up. And like last month with the log4j and all those things, it was very, very busy. It may be that you call an IR firm and they said, sorry, we can't really take you on because we're like really busy, providing all these services to our existing clientele. So think of like that retainer as a way for you to make sure that you have that allocated resources for you. Hey, by the way, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just like talking from experience.
Okay. All right. I think that's all the questions we've got. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Gyle.
And thank you very much for listening to my talk. I hope you learned something from this. Hit me up in Twitter if you have any questions. Okay, so take care. And once again, I can't give everybody hugs, so I'm going to give you a Wakandan salute. Like AOL, giving hugs. Take care, be well, and be safe, everyone. Thank you.